Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to share this interview with you. I recently had the absolute honor of interviewing Temple Grandin and talking to her about animal welfare and neurodivergency. We mainly focused on the topic of animal welfare, but it's a well-rounded interview discussion that has a lot of different topics. For those of you who are not aware, Temple Grandin is a professor at the Colorado State University. She's an animal behaviorist, a best-selling author, and an autism self-advocate, and has spoken all over the world as an international speaker on all of the above. She's been a huge trailblazer in the animal welfare field and has made major improvements to the architecture of animal production facilities, and is just all in all a cool person who has done a lot of things to improve the welfare of both humans and animals. And I'm so excited to share this interview with you. I still can't believe that she agreed to talk to me, and I'm just incredibly thankful for everything that she's done and her as a person. So I hope you enjoy the interview as much as I did, and enjoy.
Well, my name's Temple Grandin, and I am a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. And I've been there for 30 years. I work in animal behavior. And when I was a teenager and getting bullied in high school, horses were one of my refuges away from bullying. It was one of the few places I had friends, was with riding horses. I also took care of the school's horse barn, and I cleaned 9 stalls every day and fed the horses and took care of them. They were basically my life when I was in high school.
That is so cool that your high school had a horse barn. That's amazing. And I really actually relate to that because that was kind of me in high school as well. With the horses and bullying. So yeah, you've done so much. Like I've read so much about what you've done for the slaughter industry for improving practices within the slaughterhouses for the animals. I haven't finished it yet, but I was reading a bit of your book, Thinking in Pictures, and I found it super interesting to hear about how when you were doing that, you would walk around at their eye level and notice things that no one else would pick up on that was scaring the animals in those plants. So specific to horses, I kind of wanted to touch on that thought process and ask you, do you have any things in like modern traditional horse stall barn setups, or like think about like the average boarding facility in the modern world where horses are kept, things that you notice that humans might not be aware of, but that are impacting welfare?
Where horses get scared is in an unfamiliar environment. And when I got down in the chutes and I looked at what cattle were seeing, they only go through that chute once. Or let's say it's at a feed yard for vaccinations, they might go through it twice. So they're going into a new place. So any little shadow, a chain hanging down, a reflection, seeing a vehicle parked along the facility would make the animal stop. Now, in a boarding stable, after the horse gets used to it, you might have a sunbeam or a shadow on the floor that he'll get used to walking over. Now, when he first goes in that stable, that's when he would stop at it. And there'll be a tendency of, let's say there's a sunbeam on the floor or a really sharp shadow, the animal may put its head down to look, give it the opportunity to look, or maybe a drain in the middle of the floor. Any place where the floor changes, they tend to stop. Now, a horse that's lived in that barn for a month is just going to walk over that drain. But let's say they go to a veterinary clinic where that's a strange new environment. They may not want to walk over the drain. Give the animal a chance to look at it. And then when the head comes back up, then try to lead them over the drain. You see, new things are both scary and attractive. Something new is attractive if your animal can voluntarily approach it. And it's scary if you suddenly shove it in their face. And my student, Megan Corgan, recently did a paper on the reaction of the quarter horses to a complex rotated object. Did you see that paper?
I don't know if it's the exact same paper, but I've seen another one on something like that where they were seeing how horses reacted to an object as they oriented it differently.
Well, that's exactly what this paper was about. And what we took was a children's play set with a little swing and a slide. And very colorful, and walked fillies and colts by it 15, 16 times until they no longer reacted. These were halter broke, but not trained to ride yet, fillies and colts. And when that play set was rotated, it became a new object. But think about it. I'm going to demonstrate here with my book, Visual Thinking, my new book. the child's slide is going to look like this in one position and like this in the other position. See how different that looks? It became a new object. We would tend to look at that and go, yeah, it's a kid's toy.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks very different when it's turned. And this may explain some of the unexplained spooking the horse does. Well, it just spooked.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the students told me that her horse spooked when she put its feed trough up on end and leaned it against the wall. The horse hadn't ever seen his feed trough in that position, and it became a new object because it would have looked very different. And then we have a paper on this, a free access paper. It's the title something like a reaction to a complex rotated object in the American quarter horse. They insisted on having American quarter horse in there for some reason. But then I kind of informally repeated the experiment with some Western riders. Everything was done at a walk. This was done at a walk, or it would have been dangerous. Well, he walked the Western riders by this big green chair, big green outdoor porch chair, until they no longer reacted, no longer stopped. Rotated this chair 90 degrees, and half the horses did a hard stop when the chair was rotated 90 degrees.
Wow.
Well, if that had been done at a gallop, the riders would have been done.
Oh yeah, they would have shot over
very carefully, we did it at a walk. I didn't want anything dangerous. I just wanted to prove the point that when that object got rotated, the horses were going to stop.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of horse people, surprisingly, they don't consider that, because I've noticed, I don't know that the next question that I was going to have with you will play into this, but in horse sports, for example, when you're traveling to tons and tons of new places, and like for jumping, for example, basically every new jump you see is going to be a new object. But growing up, what I was taught to do when horses would do stuff like that is to punish them, use the whip, kick them, don't let them get away with it.
Let's not.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to ask, what's your opinion on like the ethicality of horse sports, for like, be it horse racing?
Fine if they're done right. I went to the big fancy jumping and dressage World Cup in Omaha, and the dressage horses were sweating, flipping their tails around, a lot of sign of stress, and people think this is normal, frothing at the mouth.
Yeah.
The one that won, and this made me pleased, the horse that won the dressage was relaxed, and he wasn't covered in sweat. And I think he enjoyed doing the pee off. I think the other horses thought it was the piss off. and this is something where they think force is the way to do it. Now, you take a horse around to enough jumping courses, there's a certain sameness. And there is somewhat of a little bit of ability to generalize. Okay, a horse goes in 5 or 6 different one-horse trailers. There's typical regular ones. Now, he'd probably go in another one-horse trailer. But if a horse had smashed his head the first time he went into a one-horse trailer, he's going to hate one-horse trailers. But he may be finding a big show van because that looks very different. So you can sometimes solve a problem with something they're afraid of by making it different. At our right horse program, this is a program where students train rescue horses so they can rehab them and then sell them as good riding horses. And this one horse was frothing at the mouth with this bit, just frothing at the mouth. And it was a jointed snaffle bit. And I think in the past he'd been abused with that bit because these were rescues. We don't know the history. So we went in the tack room and we found a one-piece straight bar bit that's going to feel different. No more frothing at the mouth.
Cool.
It was like opening a new file folder in that horse's brain. So then I have the students, and this is one of the things we do now, is hold the different bits, jointed bits versus straight bits, and think of them as feeling pictures. And then anecdotally, I have talked to a number of people where they switched bits, and that solved a lot of problems because the horse had bad memories with maybe being abused with a bit, and often it's a snaffle they get abused with. And then you replace it with a one piece. And we actually did this in the right horse program last spring. That was my best day.
That's so cool.
We put that straight bit in and it worked like magic.
Regarding the frothing, there's a belief in the horse world that frothing means that they're relaxed in the jaw and that they're soft. And I just
wasn't soft. It was frothing at the mouth, all tense and terrible.
Yeah.
And when we put the one piece in, it stopped.
Okay.
It was not relaxed. relaxed.
Do you think there's any situations in which horses will froth at the mouth when they are relaxed, or do you think that's like a misnomer that people have created to justify the behavior?
Well, I think most of the time it's
Yeah.
stress.
Yeah, I
And
agree with
these
you.
horses at this World Cup in Omaha that I just went to, this was within the last year, half these horses, the dressage are covered in sweat, completely covered in sweat. And this was an indoor arena.
Oh, wow.
It was not hot there.
Yeah. Yeah, people think that's like I've seen that a lot too, and I've thought the same things. They'll be like frothing sweat. It's not even like they're just like damp sweat, and they'll be like, "Oh, it's just really hard work. They're athletes." But
Well, no,
yeah,
it's not that hard to work because they don't sweat like that if they're not stressed. And the horse just goes out and does the jumping course once.
yeah,
It shouldn't be covered in sweat. Now, I think it's really
100%.
good to take horses out to lots of different novel places
Mm-hmm.
because then they're less likely to see something new that would scare them.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the worst things are flags, bikes, and balloons.
Mm-hmm.
Flags, bikes, and balloons are really bad. And one of the ways to get them used to bikes is to let a horse just come up to a stationary bike, then you walk it around, then gradually ride it.
Mm-hmm.
Introduce it gradually. Drones can be another issue. Now, if a drone just stays way up in the air, they don't notice that. But we had a really, really bad thing happen at our equine center with a news photographer who took a drone and went at some horses like a
Oh
plane coming in
no.
for a
Oh
landing.
no.
And they were two Western horses. They were all tacked up. They got so freaked out, they were not rideable for 20 minutes. I
Oh my
timed
gosh.
it. It took 20 minutes for those horses to calm down. Then we get on them to ride them. And this idiot takes his drone again and comes right at us like this.
Oh my God.
We were very lucky not to get bucked off. It was the dumbest thing.
Yeah.
Now,
Jeez.
what we need to be doing is get them accustomed to drones. First of all, let them just see it, hold it in your hand. And the other thing is, if you put a drone way up in the air, and I've seen this with cattle too, and you slowly just bring it down, they look up and stare at it.
Yeah.
But when it swoops horizontally, that's when it really scares. And if an animal gets really scared, it takes 20 minutes to calm back down. Just think about it. Have you ever been in a near car accident?
Yeah.
You're near car accident. Think about how long it took for you to calm down after that.
Oh yeah, long time because you feel all shaky and nervous
That's right.
after,
That's
and
20,
yeah.
20 minutes, 30 minutes.
So the next question that I had for you is from the horse world. What would be some of the most like the biggest ethical problems that you would identify that you think need to be addressed in the horse world?
Well, we have two things here, what we do in training and what we do with breeding. There's two issues here. I think it's fine to have dressage and have jumping. And there was one horse there that won it, and I think he had fun doing it. And that's the way it should be. Now, I'm very concerned about these racehorses that have died recently, and it's not been fully explained. You know, we're breeding that animal for speed. So what you end up breeding is little thin, lightweight skeleton, big muscles, big heart, and I think they're getting some heart failure. You over-select for the performance trait, speed, you're going to get into trouble. I'm very concerned about them. I'm concerned about things we're doing with cattle right now, too, where we're breeding just for big meat, and we've got foot and leg problems. We have some heart problems, dying of heart failure. And those horses that died, what happened? Was it a broken leg? I certainly like to see what the hearts look like. Did they have heart failure? This is stuff that we need to know.
Mm-hmm.
We found out in cattle that genetics is very much related to heart failure. And one feed yard told me that they were doing Angus semen on Holstein to make Angus Holstein cross steers, and they one sire was causing a lot of heart failure.
Wow.
Because they had absolute traceback. I have real problems. I don't care if it's a pet, whether it's a meat animal, a production animal, or milking cow, or it's a performance animal. You over-select for any trait, you are going to ruin your animal. And the problem that you have is these problems happen slowly.
Mm-hmm.
I call that bad becoming normal. Thinking that horses are sweating all over is normal. That's bad becoming normal. And you can slowly creep into that. I'm concerned about some of these Arabians where the dish face makes them look like a seahorse.
Yeah.
These kinds of things really concern me. And you type extreme Arabian horse into Google Images and you see,
Yeah,
and I think that's just terrible. Dish face is nice, but don't overdo it.
yeah.
So genetics and then rough training methods. One of the things that's getting more and more gentle training methods. I was really pleased what they were doing with the right horses, very gently gentling them. They also teach them to ride with a halter and a saddle before they even put bridle on them. And they don't just shove the bit in their mouth and force it. One thing, I watched one horse that was getting first introduced to the bit, and he was going like this. And then when he stopped for just a second, they took it out.
Aw.
In other words, when they cooperate,
Mm-hmm.
you give relief. Okay, if you're
Yeah.
training it to lead and he takes a step forward, don't keep pulling on the lead rope.
Mm-hmm.
Give it relief. Reward it for stepping forward. There's good pressure and release. But there's some training methods that definitely need to be changed. And I saw a lot of tail switching going on at that show. And then I saw dumb things that spectators in the VIP box did that actually ruined the jumping for one of the contestants.
Oh,
Just
no.
as he was coming up to this one jump, somebody stood up in the VIP box, right in the horse's line of sight, and he refused to jump.
Aw.
But let's not have that kind of stuff going on. He should have been allowed to run that over again.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
I was watching really
frustrating.
carefully. That's exactly what happened. It ruined it for that one contestant.
Yeah, people are kind of out to lunch, I think, about how some of their actions impact the horses. And
Well, especially when the horse was headed right towards the VIP
yeah.
box.
Yeah.
And it was down low. It was right next to the ring fence. It wasn't one of the sky boxes. It was down really low, right at the level of the horse.
Oh, that's brutal. Yeah, that's tough because I bet a lot of the people going there don't even consider it if they're not full on horse people. But then if they are, then it's like, what are you thinking? The next question I had, because I was looking at a lot of the architecture designs you've done for meat plants, and I wanted to ask you, have you ever worked on any of the chute systems or the squeezes that they use in the Mustang corrals or for
Yes.
rounding up? Okay,
Yes.
cool. Did
And
you
we've
do
used-
the hydraulic like press that they use
Well,
to
that
feed?
Flying W, that's really nice. I did not design that, but some of my standard cattle handling facility
Okay.
designs have been
Cool.
used, very successful for like loading Mustangs onto a truck.
Yeah.
Standard curved cattle handling chute.
Yeah.
And it worked just fine, worked really well for Mustangs.
Yeah, because I was looking at some of the designs that you like. I saw that for the cows you did like pie shaped loading areas and like never any 90-degree corners, like smooth corners. And I was noticing that there's so many similarities to how they build the Mustangs pens with that. So I found that so interesting because
I went to one of the Mustang pens and they had a standard curved loading ramp for cattle that came right out of one of my cattle handling books, and they built it for Mustangs, and it worked really well.
perfect. Yeah. So the next question I had, this is kind of related. Like I know in the US, horse slaughter is not currently legal. I'm in Canada, so we do have horse slaughter plants. I just wanted to ask pertaining to that, are there any unique struggles for horses in meat processing plants because of how different they are from cows? Or
the main difference with a horse is it's much more flighty.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say you're using beef facilities, you need to put real high sights on the stun box so they can't see out onto the floor. But the main thing that's different is since they're more flighty, you need to have one person to bring them up the chute and load them into the stun box, and another person to shoot them. In cattle, you can have a person load them in the stun box, run around and shoot them. That will work. Don't do that with horses. They need to come into the box, shut the door, bang. 2 people. And you also need a really good non-slip flooring.
Yeah.
Cannot emphasize that enough.
Okay, yeah, because I was reading that there's like a lot of differences in horses, like because the height difference I'm sure would be huge with how much lower.
Well, you have to any animal you don't want to look onto the processing floor.
Yeah.
And if it's a beef box, you're going to have to raise the sides on it. But I've been in some horse slaughter plants that were pretty rudimentary in their design, old, and they worked just fine.
Okay.
And this is the place where you have to make sure you don't have a sunbeam on the floor. You don't have a shadow. You don't have some piece of metal that jiggles.
Mhm.
A big reflection on a puddle on the floor, because it's a totally strange place, and they're going
Yeah.
to stop and refuse to enter.
Yeah.
But I went to one that was a rather old-fashioned facility in Canada, and they just would open the door on the stun box, they'd walk in, bang, it was done.
Good.
Walk
That's
in
good to
without
know.
touching them.
Yeah.
Or to get them in, you do the same movement pattern you do in cattle. You want the horse to go this way, then you walk back by them this way,
Mhm.
and they go right in. Here's their little movement pattern right here that I have for cattle, and
Oh, okay.
a little movement pattern. And what you do is you walk back by them. I was just at a plant yesterday. They were doing Holstein steers, and I just walked back by like 8 steers, and they just went right up the chute.
Cool.
And so, but most of the horses in this rather old plant, not a fancy facility, most of them, when they opened the gate on the box, they just walked in.
That's good to know, because I mean,
And
it's hard to know what actually goes on when you see like organizations like PETA that post the videos, because I know some of that stuff's sensationalized with how
you
abusive it
also
can be.
have one of those videos that they were in beef equipment, and the horses were looking out over the side onto the processing floor, and that's absolutely not okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so sad.
And you've got to get the distractions out of there, because it's a totally novel environment, and that's what they're reacting to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is going in a different direction with questions, but this is something that I've personally thought about a lot. I like for reference, I have ADHD, so I'm neurodivergent, but I've been wondering, do you think there's any evidence or possibility of any type of neurodivergence in any other mammalian species, or is that something that's not been looked at, studied, or even considered at all in animal
Well,
sciences?
let's take dogs. Now, this is just, some dogs are much more affectionate and want attention from people more than other dogs. I've seen that. And some of the animals that are more of the wild type, you tend to get less of that wanting all that contact with people. That's variation in the personality of the animal. And in my book, Animals Make Us Human, I talk about the Panskep emotional systems. You have fear, you have anger, you have separation distress, you've got seeking and the urge to explore, you got the sex drive, but then you have this nurture. And this is probably the trait, the oxytocin system, where some dogs have more of that and they want to just be petted constantly, and other dogs don't. And while we're talking about petting, and with horses, I see people hitting their horses like this.
Yeah.
That's not petting. Stroke it,
Mm-hmm.
maybe scratch it on the other. They're hitting their horses. I saw that all the time. No, that's interpreted by the horses hitting. And in Animals in Translation, one of my earlier books, when I had several people come up to me that their relationship with their dog improved because now they were stroking it like the mother's tongue instead of hitting it.
Yeah.
They didn't realize they were hitting it. But there's definite differences in personalities of animals. And we're now allowed to use the term personality. They'll talk about bold and shy. That'd be the same as high and low fear. High explorer, low explorer.
Cool. Yeah, I've always because I've noticed too, even from birth, like sometimes they're obviously influenced by being mistreated, but sometimes you'll meet animals who right from birth, they're either, more curious or more interested in people or more afraid.
That is a legitimate area of research.
Yeah.
And they're definite, and they're genetic differences.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen that with dogs. I mean, there's some dogs where they just can't get enough petting, and there's other dogs that they're kind of aloof.
Yeah. Do you find that the parents of them play a huge role in their personality then, whether they're around them a lot or not? Like, if their parents have trauma?
Well, learning can also affect things.
Yeah.
And a lot of rescues, you don't know what they did to them. Some of those dogs have been traumatized. But there's also just innate personality differences. I mean, you talk to moms that have had a whole bunch of children, and they'll say, "Oh, well, Susie was a lot different than Jim." Or maybe, it's in the personality. Yeah, and you definitely can have personality differences in animals. And 20 years ago, you weren't allowed to use that term. 30 years ago, when I wrote one of my first papers, I wasn't allowed to put the word fear in it. They made me call it agitation. Weird. Well, things have changed a lot, and now we're allowed to use those words, and they are scientifically correct words.
Yeah, that must be so validating for you that it's
and in my
much.
Animals Make Us Human book, I go through the whole Jack Pence emotional systems.
Cool. I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah, Animals Make Us
yeah.
Human. It's got kind of a tan cover on it.
I'll link all your books and whatnot in the description of this as well, so people can go and find them. The next question that I had was that I know that I don't have as much experience in agriculture as you, but from what I've seen, it seems to be way more common to keep animals like cows and sheep in group housing. And I just wanted to ask your opinion on traditional horse stall architecture and why you think it is that it's so much less common to have horses in group housing, like even indoors. Like I'm thinking of like dairy cows, how when they're housed indoors, they're all in the same type
Well,
of
they're
area.
the only, like right now, I just went to a very good dairy yesterday, and they used to just raise all the dairy little tiny babies in individual huts. Now they're putting 2 in the hut. But as soon as 6 weeks old, they're group housed.
Mm-hmm.
That's been done in dairies I've been in the industry for 50 years, and when I was in graduate school in the 70s, once they were 6 weeks old, they were group housed. And I think we cause a lot of behavior problems in stallions because they don't grow up learning to give and take a social behavior if you keep them locked in a stall. Mm-hmm. And so you get a lot of fighting. Animals that are reared by themselves will sometimes fight. And some of these stallions, young stallions, need to kind of learn some social manners, maybe from older geldings. Mm-hmm. But if you do this, do not do it in a small confined pen.
Yeah.
Do this in a big pasture. I saw a really bad situation where the geldings just severely bit the horse's back.
Oh, no.
Because there was no way to get away, and it was a small pen. And I said, you made a big mistake. Let's never do that again. Now, if that had been in a big pasture, but you can have a real problem with a horse that's been reared by itself, and once it's exerted dominance, it keeps on fighting. It doesn't know it doesn't have to keep fighting. Mm-hmm. And I saw a black horse one time that had lived alone in a 20-acre pasture. He about tried to kill every horse you put in that pasture because he'd been reared totally alone. And that horse had to be removed. He could not live with the other horses.
Yeah, that's so sad. I wonder why it's so like because horses and cows are similar enough animals that I found the disconnect between how they're kept kind of odd. Because I find, especially in city areas, it's actually more common to see horses kept alone than it is.
No, okay, like at our equine center, we have an equine center in the middle of Denver. Mm-hmm. Really good therapeutic riding program. And what they do every day is turn all the horses out in the big arena and let them run around. Now, it's not pasture,
yeah,
but at least they're running around. They're not. They're in the stalls at night.
Yeah,
they give them a couple of hours to just run around in the arena
together. Wow, yeah,
and together. And then the other thing they're doing is every few months they rotate them out and bring in some others and put these guys out on pasture. And
that's amazing.
But keeping them just alone all the time. Now, on the other hand, if they had a horse that just was fighting everything else and it wouldn't stop, that horse would have to be taken out of that program. Mm-hmm. But I don't have any problems with keeping horses in stalls at night. But they need to have some turnout where they interact with other animals and, mm-hmm. if possible, grazing. Yeah. You have horses in a city situation, there's no way to do grazing, but at least they can run around, interact with other animals, and they tend to really run around.
Oh, yeah. Do you find that the way we wean horses as babies causes a lot of behavioral problems depending on how it's done? Because I know some places will do cold turkey weaning where they just take the mom away all at once. Other places will do it more gradual. But
we're starting now in cattle to do what's called fence line weaning, where the calf is more interested in being close to mom than drinking from her. Mm-hmm. And that's been done with horses too.
Yeah.
And then you don't have so much, weaning and separation of Bellerin and cattle.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to reduce the stress.
100%.
But I think a lot of problems we have in stallions, I think we're creating them. We keep this young stallion locked up in a stall. He doesn't have any social manners. Mm-hmm. A Mustang stud asks nicely to breed a mare.
Oh, yeah.
You can go into a feed yard, like the BLM has these big feed yards. Yeah. And you have 50 studs in a pen.
And they just exist.
And they line up like cattle to eat.
Yeah.
And you walk through them, you can touch, they get tame after a while, and you can touch them, and they get along.
Yeah, I found that fascinating because I just got two Mustangs and seeing the difference in their social behavior and how well socialized they are compared to like I have some ex-race horses who would have been living alone for a lot of their life. It's fascinating. There's a big difference in how they interact and get used to each other. Yeah, it's really cool.
It's a much more normal situation. And Sarah Matlock, one of our faculty members, they during COVID, a lot of our horse programs got shut down, which was really sad. But they had these Mustangs in a pen and they were training them with clicker training.
Cool.
And after about 6 months of clicker training, they had strange men come in and show them at halter.
Hmm.
I was there, I saw it. Show them at halter, strange people.
Cool.
And it worked just fine. Now, one of the things that was found in this was differences. You'd go to the pen where these horses were, and you'd have 4 or 5 that come right up to you, and then one hothead in the back that took longer to train.
Yeah.
That's just the difference in their innate level of fearfulness.
Yeah. That's so cool.
But what they did is just use clicker training that when they approached, they got, click and they got fed. Clickers
Yeah.
associated with feed. And they do any little positive thing, they get a click, and it's on a variable reinforcement schedule, sort of like Vegas.
Yeah.
You don't get a reward every time you pull the arm on the one-armed bandit.
Yeah.
It gives you an award just part of the time on a variable, very variable. Well,
Yeah.
it's
And then,
kind of the same thing with
yeah.
clicker training.
That's awesome. That's so cool. So I had a question, and like this is about I had someone that wanted me to ask you this. They were wondering about finding balance about when to intervene with domesticated animals suffering. Like so when you should intervene with euthanasia versus what is a fair level of suffering to keep them in to help them recover from injury or disease. How do you kind of know when is the time to let go versus
Well, I mean, let's say, if a horse gets a broken leg, it's probably never going to recover for
yeah.
good enough for riding. You have to look at what's the chance of a full recovery. That's one of the things I would look at. But then I've seen stuff where they carried treatment on too long. I remember there was a horse years ago that I've forgotten the name of it, where they kept the veterinary stuff going on forever. They had it in a sling, and that went on way too long. Or let's look at. I'd have to think more in specific examples. Or let's say it's sick and you're treating it with medication, and it's going to take a week maybe for it to work. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do that. But it's, one of the big problems now is when do you euthanize old ancient dogs? And you have to think about, does it have a life worth living? The other problem is you get, this happened with my aunt's German Shepherd. And when I went away to graduate school, the Boots, that was the name of the dog, was mobile but weak. She was okay. I got back 6 weeks later, and her whole hind end was paralyzed, and she was dragging it. And I go, it's time to euthanize her. But you see, my aunt didn't see it because it happened slowly.
Yeah.
I had been away at graduate school for 6 weeks. So she had gone from weak but mobile to dragging her hind end.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, I call that bad becoming normal.
Yeah.
They don't realize it, and it slowly gets worse. Slowly gets worse and worse.
Aw.
And sometimes people try to keep it alive too long and do endless chemos. And you've got to remember, if we do chemo in a person, the person knows why we're doing it. A dog doesn't know.
Yeah.
And you
Oh.
can go on with these things where you're just going on and on and on. I'm not saying you never do chemo in animals. Let's say you do a couple of courses of it and there's a good chance of getting another 5 years. Yeah, that's probably worth doing.
Mm-hmm.
That you could do. Or you have a dog's diabetic, you're gonna have to give it insulin. If you give it insulin, maybe it's got a decent life. Yeah, that a lot of people would do. That'd be fine.
Yeah.
I tend to think in specific examples, and I see it. And I talk about different kinds of thinking. I also talk about animal consciousness in my book, Visual Thinking. An animal lives in a sensory-based world, not a word-based world.
Mm-hmm.
And what is it seeing, feeling, hearing, tasting, touching? It's sensory based.
Yeah, that actually kind of plays into my next question, because I read a quote from you where you were talking about that you identified fear as a primary emotion of an autistic person. So I wanted to ask, like, do you think that you can relate to animals better in that capacity because of how differently you might experience the world from other people?
No, I think that helped me maybe with horses and cattle are both prey species animals,
Mm-hmm.
and they get scared very easily because they see some novel stimuli, some little thing that moves. Well, out in the wild, that might be a lion in the bushes or something that might attack them.
Yeah.
Very, very vigilant.
Oh, for sure. So do you think that do you think there's any link between neurodivergency in people and like a connection with animals? Because I know there's been a few studies on horses with their therapeutic work with autistic people.
Well, I know people that are good horse trainers, or also very good at working with cattle, that I think are on the autism spectrum.
Cool.
And they get along with animals extremely well. In fact, when I'm looking for jobs for people on the spectrum, I talk about the different kinds of minds. You got the visual mind like me, picture mind, port math. We're good with animals, mechanical devices, photography, and art. Then you have your pattern thinker, things in mathematics, computer science, chemistry, music. And then you have your word thinker, that thinks completely in words. And I think some word thinkers, I'm not saying all, have a trouble understanding maybe that an animal's conscious because they don't think in words. It's very easy for me to think, the dog definitely thinks, and the dog is definitely conscious. Same thing with the horse. And I was just out at a feed yard. I went on a big farm tour yesterday. Went on the feed yard, and this little 9-year-old was riding the horse in this family's feed yard. And there were such nice, gentle horses. I was petting their noses. They really liked people. It was obvious that nobody had done anything bad to these horses.
Aw.
I was stroking the kid's horse, and he had to start riding a new horse, and they gave him a trained horse, and he just started riding it.
Aw.
And I stroked the noses of the horses. They have no tendency to pull away. It was obvious to me that these people had really treated those horses well. And then I found out that they had been in my class like in the mid 2000s.
That's so cool. So that this also plays into what I just asked you. It's how do you manage autism and any overwhelm and stress that might have to come with like being around animals who are scared or might be suffering, or being like aware of these problems in the world? Is it difficult, or
Well, that's a very top-down generality.
yeah.
I tend to think much more specific. Okay, I gave you a specific example where a dog definitely should be euthanized. Another example a vet student gave me, it was disgusting. It was a valuable mare, and they were collecting eggs from her, and she was down and crippled, and they were keeping her alive to collect eggs from her, and she couldn't even walk. And I said, that's totally wrong.
Yeah.
That was being done strictly for monetary reasons.
That's awful.
That was an example I got from a vet student. It was quite about 10 years ago. But you see, I think in specific examples of things where that animal's life definitely should have been ended. And other things, well, maybe it's sick with something and give it some drugs for 10 days, and it'll be better. Yeah, you go ahead and do that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You see, that's thinking about something specific. I take specific examples of situations where I think the animal ought to be euthanized, and situations where no, it's going to get better.
Yeah.
And it'll get better fairly quickly.
Yeah. And then does that make it easier to kind of like, if there's a
Yes.
solution, you kind of, okay, that makes sense. Is there any advice you'd give to people who want to help improve animal welfare, in terms of how to go about it, how to deal with,
Well, let's be specific. When I started out working with cattle, I worked with one thing, cattle handling. That's something specific. It's something doable.
Yeah.
And I worked on training people in cattle handling, and I worked on better facilities. And another thing I did is I wrote about it. I wrote a lot of just how-to articles. Let's say you've got a really good, low-stress, gentle training method for horses. Write about it in the horse magazines.
Yeah.
And just tell people how to do it. Put it up on your website. Just tell people how to do it. Really simple directions on how to do it. And that's something I've been doing all my life. And as a visual thinker, as I write directions on how to move the cattle, I see them.
Yeah.
See, nothing's
cool.
vague. And just good how-to articles.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice
You
to
know, I
be
took this
specific.
Mustang and it was wilder and wild, and this is how I gentled it.
Yeah. That's really, I think that's excellent advice, just to pick like a specific
Pick
issue.
something
And
specific to work on. You
yeah.
can't work on all of animal welfare. That's impossible.
Yeah.
You could work on training methods. You could work on helping horses that are really, have all kinds of behavior problems. I mean, pick something out that's specific. Now, I don't like horses just housed in stalls all day and they never get to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, for
And
sure.
in our riding centers, they're taken out and they have time to run around in the arena. It's
Yeah.
not, and they like to play.
Yeah, they're such funny interactive. I love horses. They're so much fun.
And a lot of people, the rough training stuff has gotten a whole lot less.
Yeah.
But there's still some people they just want to force it.
Yeah. They're very, some people, I think they take it personally when horses react fearfully and they think it's out of naughtiness or
Well, you can have a
disrespect.
totally trained horse that freaked out in an upright water trough,
Yeah.
upright feed trough, rather. It wasn't a water trough. And the horse that's going to have the biggest reaction to something like that might be an Arab, because that animal gets scared more easily than maybe a quarter horse, a calm quarter horse. See, there's different genetic differences in how quickly that animal can get scared.
100%. So I had another question that someone wanted me to ask you. That they were asking, like, what is there any advice you would give people who either like horse trainers or teachers, like people in human education, for working with autistic and neurodivergent people to help make the environment feel safer for them?
Let's make sure there's no bullying going on in the barn. I just talked to a student recently that was in college, and she was working out at the farm, and there were some people in the barn that were really nasty to her. Let's make sure that kind of stuff is not going on. That's the first thing. The other thing is long strings of verbal instructions don't work. All right, let's say the feeding process for the horses, make a pilot's checklist with written bullet points instead of just yakety yak, 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 because I have a hard time remembering long strings of verbal information. So those are two things you can do that are very simple things in a horse.
That's awesome advice. Thank you for that. Okay, so another question that I had for you is that I saw in another interview where someone asked you if you're vegan and you said that you weren't. So I wanted to ask you that because I've had people do this to me as well, where they think that if you're involved in animal welfare, that that vegan's like the best way to go. So I wanted to ask you
I
about
don't
that.
my metabolism, I can't function on a vegan diet, neither can my mother.
Yeah.
I get too lightheaded. And I think there are genetic differences in the ability to function on a vegan diet. I would have to have, some animal protein.
Yeah. Yeah, I lose weight really quickly too, so I couldn't do fully vegan diet. I would just be skinny. But yeah, so I found that interesting because like you're directly involved in so much of the animal welfare world that I guess the point in asking that question is just to kind of clarify for more people that there's more than one way that someone could make a difference. Like you don't need to just be vegan to improve animal welfare. And
I'm getting really interested in a lot of sustainability issues. And I've got a paper I've done on grazing, and people don't realize that 20% of the world's land can only be grazed. And you can put goats, cattle, sheep, bison on that land. And if you do the grazing right, you can actually improve the land. Really? I was just looking at the news, and Microsoft Bing had an article on people renting sheep to mow lawns.
Oh, cool.
That's something that's very, very sustainable. That's really good sustainable stuff. Because you can use the grazing animals to improve land. And then the only way we can raise food on 20% of all the land in the world, of habitable land, is grazing. There's not enough water for crops, not enough water in the ground, and not enough water in the rain.
Okay, yeah, because it's confusing. There's so much conflicting information that I've seen about that, where people are saying like, oh, the amount of water we use to water animals is too much, but then crops require a lot of water too. And I also found it interesting is that a lot of people who do only eat plant-based diets, I don't think they're necessarily aware of how many animals die even just to maintain crops.
Well, I think the other thing is, almond milk from a sustainability standpoint is a terrible product because almonds are giant water pigs.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to use an alternative milk, it would make a lot more sense to oat milk.
Oat milk?
That would make a lot more sense.
Yeah. Okay.
But not to grind up almonds and they are gigantic, huge water pigs.
Yeah. Interesting.
Okay, I'm going to have to get off and
Yeah.
get on to another Zoom meeting. They have just texted me.
Okay, yeah, no worries. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for doing this. I
But it's
really
been really
appreciate
good
it.
to talk to you.
Yeah, and I'll send you the links to everything when I get it all put up. And then I really appreciate you giving me your time because I know you're super busy. So I really
I'm
appreciate
telling
it.
the other Zoom call that I'm logging in now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was lovely talking to you and getting to meet you virtually.
All right. It
Yeah.
was great to talk to you, and I'm going to sign off, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Have a great day.
I will.
Thank you for listening to the interview and watching this video. I really appreciate everyone's support to my channels and my social medias in general, because without your support, I don't think I would get the opportunities to interview people as influential as Temple Grandin. So without you guys, this wouldn't be possible. So I really appreciate all of your support and your following, liking, sharing my videos, supporting my brand, subscribing to my Patreon, and doing all these things. It is so exponentially helpful in my business growth and growth as a person. And I'm just super grateful for all of that. For anyone who's interested, I'm going to be leaving the links to Temple Grandin's books and other means of checking out her work down below in the description of this video, and you can check that out. I'll also be leaving the links to my Patreon channel if anyone's interested in subscribing for training videos, tutorials, behind the scenes, and more. That's a great way to support my work. And then I also have an online store where I sell equestrian apparel and horse bridles, and I'll leave that linked below too if anyone's interested. I have some pretty big sales going on. I'm trying to clear out as much of product as I can. One, to make room for Christmas stock and holiday stock, and two, because unfortunately my dog, who I'm sure many of you have seen on this channel, Phoebe, she blew out her knee and needs TPLO surgery. And unfortunately this morning, as I record this part to the interview, or like this interview video, she blew out the other knee. I expected this to happen, but I didn't think it was going to happen so soon, because the knee that she blew out first was actually her stronger of the two knees. We've been treating her with injections because she has hip dysplasia and weak knees. And we knew that the knees were weak and were at risk of having an injury like this. But unfortunately, her left knee that just went today was the weaker of the two knees. So she was weighting the right knee more during the time that we were trying to rehab and treat it with injections. And so I think that's why the right knee went first. And then of course, once that knee went, she started weighting her worst knee more, and now that's gone too. So unfortunately, she's going to need TPLO surgery for the worst of the two knees first, and then she's definitely also going to need it for the other knee. So she has a long recovery ahead of her. She's only 5 years old, so I want her to be happy and healthy because she's a very active dog. So I do intend to do both surgeries, and then she's going to have a lengthy rehab process where we're probably going to have to do hydrotherapy and some other stuff. So it's really sad. She's not a super happy camper. She's sleeping on my bed there behind me. She's sad because obviously it hurts. She is on painkillers. I wouldn't leave her to deal with knee injuries without them because I know how painful they are from personal experience. But yeah, I'm just waiting to hear back about when we can get her in for surgery. I've gotten referrals to a few different clinics, and I'm just going to get multiple different opinions before we make a firm decision of where to send her and what the general plan is going to be for when she gets which surgery and the time frame between it all and whatnot. So I'm trying to clear out a bunch of products because her injury is coming less than a month after I had to replace my truck transmission unexpectedly, because my truck is a 2018, so the transmission shouldn't have needed to be replaced, and unfortunately it was like 2,000 kilometers out of warranty. So I had to cover the full cost of that, which was like $6,000. So I'm just getting absolutely drop kicked by bills right now. So I'm trying to clear out as much stock as I can in my store. So if you're interested in helping me out with that, you can check out my Patreon channel. You can check out my store. I also have training videos and webinars available for purchase on my main website. And I've also made Phoebe a GoFundMe for anyone who is interested in helping with the cost of the surgery, because what we're looking at is anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 just for the surgeries. And then there's going to be follow-up appointments in rehab. So it's going to be really expensive. She's going to get the care that she needs regardless because she is my little buddy and I want her to have a happy life. And given the issue that is her hip dysplasia as is, I know that she's going to be putting more wear and tear on her body because of her conformational issues. So I want to make sure that we treat this so that she has the best chance of having a happy, full life into her senior years, because I was already quite worried about what things may look like for her as she ages because of the conformational issues. And unfortunately, she's also fat and she does need to lose weight. So this is part of the problem because we were trying to find a happy medium between exercising her and doing rehab work for the knees before they blew out to help her lose weight. And making sure that she doesn't overdo it. And she's a very active dog, so it's difficult because she's also a very easy keeper. So when she has her activity restricted, she gains weight very easily. Now she's on an even more restricted diet and we're trying to get as much weight off as possible. And that's also why I want to get her into surgery ASAP, because then she can start her hydrotherapy after that. And I think hydrotherapy is going to be one of the better ways to exercise her and help get more weight off without putting too much strain on her knees. But anyways, I'm going to leave all the links down below for that in the description, and thank you everyone for your support. If I'm posting less or I seem sad, it's going to be because of that. It is very hard seeing how compromised her ability to do the things that she loves is. And also, I know that the rehab is going to be hard for her because she's not going to like being kennelled. She's used to coming basically everywhere I go with me, and getting to come down to the horses all the time. And now all of that is unfortunately going to be taken away from her so that she can heal. And it's just sad because obviously she doesn't understand that. But we're going to do our best to keep her as happy as possible during rehab. And I hope that the surgery and the subsequent rehab is just nice and easy for her. But anyways, thanks everyone for listening and thank you for your understanding.